I was standing in a courthouse in Colorado because of a pile of firewood. Not a weapon, not a crash, not some wild scandal firewood. And the Homeowners Association wasn't just threatening fines. They were trying to force me to pay the community back for wood I bought with my own money. My name's Mark Reynolds, and 6 months after I retired, I moved into a quiet neighborhood called Pine Creek Estates. One-story homes, clean sidewalks, mountains in the distance. Exactly the kind of place you pick when you're done with deadlines and meetings and you just want to build a bookshelf in your garage without anyone breathing down your neck. My wife Linda passed 2 years earlier. So yeah, I wasn't chasing excitement. I was chasing peace. The realtor mentioned there was an HOA, but she said it like it was a footnote. Snow removal. The pool may be sending out a newsletter about trash pickup. Relaxed. Nothing crazy. That was my first mistake. Believing the word relaxed. Colorado winters don't play around, and my place had a fireplace I actually wanted to use. There's something about a real fire on a cold night in a quiet house that makes everything feel less sharp. I also do woodworking, so I'm in the garage a lot, and I like having extra wood around. Not to sell, not for some business, just for my own life. Then I found a deal about 20 miles outside town. A tree service had cleared a huge property and needed seasoned hardwood gone fast. The catch was, you had to take a lot 3 cords minimum. If you don't know what a cord is, picture a stack 4 feet high, 4 feet deep, 8 feet long. Now picture 3 of those. It's a lot of wood, but the price was unreal and I figured it would last me multiple winters. Worst case, if I had extra, I'd share with a neighbor or 2. So I scheduled delivery for a Saturday morning. The truck rolled up on time, 2 guys hopped out, and they stacked everything neatly along the side of my garage. Straight line, stable base, nothing sloppy. I had a concrete pad there from an old shed the previous owner tore down, so it wasn't even on dirt. It looked organized, like a responsible adult lives here. I remember standing there with my hands on my hips thinking finally something in my life is simple. That feeling lasted 3 days. Tuesday afternoon. I'm in the garage cutting boards for a bookshelf, sawdust everywhere, music low. Then I hear this sharp knock on the side door, fast and impatient like whoever it was already decided they were annoyed before I even opened it. I open the door and there she is, Cheryl Dawson. Late 40s hair pulled back tight, expensive cardigan clipboard in hand like it's a weapon. The kind of face that smiles only when she's winning something. She didn't say hello. She didn't introduce herself like a normal neighbor. She just looked me up and down and said, "Are you Mark Reynolds?" "I am," I said, wiping sawdust off my hands. "I'm Cheryl Dawson, president of the Pine Creek Estates Homeowners Association," she said, crisp formal like she was reading a script. "I'm here about a violation." I blinked. A violation? She pointed her pen past me, right at the wood stack. That unsightly bulk storage is in violation of Section 7, Subsection 3. Homeowners may not store excessive amounts of building materials, firewood, or other bulk items in plain view of neighbors. I turned and looked at my unsightly wood. It was stacked better than most people stack boxes in a moving truck. "That's firewood," I said, "for my fireplace. It's on my property, and it's not even visible from the street." She didn't miss a beat. The Hendersons can see it from their upstairs window. I actually paused for a second because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. "And 3 cords is excessive," she continued. "You may keep half a cord. The rest must be removed within 14 days or fines will begin." Half a cord. Like she was my mother limiting my screen time. I felt my jaw tighten. I looked at the covenants before I bought the house. There's no specific limit on firewood. Cheryl's lips pressed into a thin line. "The board determines what's reasonable." She handed me a printed notice. 14 days. Good afternoon. Then she turned and walked away like she'd just issued a parking ticket. I stood there with that paper in my hand, staring at my garage wall, listening to the saw blade hum down into silence. The anger didn't come out as yelling. It came out like heat behind my eyes, quiet, controlled, dangerous. That night I sat at my kitchen table and read the covenants from start to finish. 70-something pages of dense language. The section she quoted did mention bulk storage, sure, but it was clearly aimed at commercial materials, nuisance conditions, safety hazards. It wasn't, "You're only allowed a cute little Instagram pile of firewood." So I wrote a formal response. Calm, polite. I quoted the exact lines. I explained the wood was for personal use, not visible from the street, not a hazard neatly stacked on a concrete pad. I dropped it off at the community office. 48 hours later, I got a letter back. Appeal denied. And then, the part that made me laugh out loud in my kitchen alone, the quantity of firewood suggests you may be operating a commercial firewood business. A commercial business. Me, a retired engineer, in flannel, building a bookshelf. But Cheryl wasn't done. She proposed a compromise. Since I clearly had more than needed, she suggested 2 cords should be designated as community firewood available for any resident to take. In exchange, the HOA would consider the matter resolved. I read that paragraph 3 times. Not because it was complicated, because it was so brazen my brain kept trying to reject it. She was asking me to donate 2/3 of something I paid for, so she could look like a hero. That's when I called an attorney, David Miller, a guy who handled HOA disputes. I explained everything, and he just sighed, like he'd heard 100 versions of this story. They have authority, he said, but from what you're describing, they're overreaching. The problem is fighting them can get expensive fast. What do you recommend? I asked. He paused, then went practical. Cheapest way to cut their legs out from under this move the wood off-site storage yard. If it's not in the neighborhood, they can't pretend it's their concern. I hated that answer, not because it was wrong, because it felt like I was the one being forced to rearrange my life to accommodate someone else's obsession. But I also didn't want to burn thousands of dollars in court over a stack of oak. So I did it. I found a storage place 15 minutes away with fenced outdoor spots, boats, RVs, that kind of thing. 10 by 20 for $80 a month. I rented a truck, spent a full Saturday hauling 3 cords in multiple trips, sweating through my shirt hands, sore back aching. When I finished my property, looked exactly how Cheryl wanted, empty, boring, compliant. I even took photos of the cleared concrete pad, time-stamped, because I'd already learned one rule in this neighborhood: if it's not documented, it didn't happen. For about a week I slept better. Then the next letter came. Cheryl wrote that the board had learned I moved the firewood off-site instead of making it available to the community. She claimed I acted in bad faith and deprived residents of a community resource. Community resource. My wood. My money. Then she dropped the number 3 cords of seasoned hardwood would cost about $1,800, and the HOA expected reimbursement within 30 days to replace the resource I removed. I called David again and read it out loud, and he didn't even try to sound diplomatic. "That's insane," he said. "They have no legal basis. Don't pay. Don't respond. Keep every piece of paper." So I ignored it, and 3 weeks later I got served. The Pine Creek Estates Homeowners Association suing me for breach of covenants, acting in bad faith, and depriving the community of shared resources, seeking $1,800 plus legal fees, plus a court order demanding I return the firewood to my property so residents could take it. I sat at my kitchen table with the lawsuit in front of me, and for a moment the calculation hit me hard. Not the emotional stuff, the real stuff. Time, money, stress. The fact that I moved here to stop dealing with fights. And now I was literally being dragged into court because someone with a clipboard wanted to play king. There was a point that night where I stared at the papers and thought I could just pay it. I could just make this disappear. Not because I believed I owed them, because I wanted my life back. But then I pictured what that payment would actually mean. It would mean Cheryl learned she could threaten pressure, invent a community resource, and get rewarded for it. And it wouldn't stop with me. It would be the next guy's truck, the next woman's garden, the next family's holiday lights. So I called David and said, "I want you to represent me, and I don't want to just defend hitback." That's when the tone changed. David filed our response, denied every claim, and filed a counterclaim harassment abuse of process overreach. Then he started digging. Meeting minutes, enforcement history, board approvals, financials. And the first real crack showed up fast. There was no board vote recorded anywhere authorizing Cheryl's community firewood demand. No minutes, no motion, no discussion. It was just Cheryl deciding it, writing it, and acting like it was law. The hearing was set for late January. Walking into that courthouse, I felt strangely calm. Like once you're in it, there's nothing left to imagine. Just facts, just arguments, just someone in a robe deciding if reality still matters. Cheryl showed up with the HOA's attorney, Scott Kramer. He looked uncomfortable from the start, like he knew he was holding a bad hand but had to play it anyway. The judge, Judge Elaine Carter, was in her 60s with a no-nonsense face. She flipped through the complaint, then looked up. "Let me make sure I understand," she said. "The HOA is suing Mr. Reynolds because he purchased firewood, stored it on his property, then moved it to private storage after a complaint. And now the HOA claims that firewood should be treated as community property." Scott Kramer cleared his throat and started with the soft language, "Your Honor." The quantity indicated he had more than personal use and in the spirit of cooperation. Judge Carter cut him off. "Did he buy it with his own money?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And does the Homeowners Association have any ownership interest in personal property purchased by a homeowner and stored on that homeowner's land?" Kramer hesitated. "Not explicitly, Your Honor, but the covenants require residents to act in the best interest of the community." Judge Carter stared at him like he'd just tried to sell her a bridge. Acting in the best interests of the community does not mean surrendering private property. Then she looked down, made a note, and said words I'll never forget because they were so clean, so final. "I'm dismissing this lawsuit. It has no legal merit." My shoulders dropped before I even realized they were tense. But she wasn't done. She turned to David. "I see there's a counterclaim for harassment and abuse of process. I'm inclined to let that proceed. File a brief and we'll schedule the next hearing." Cheryl's face drained of color. She leaned toward Kramer and whispered something fast, urgent. Kramer didn't even look at her. He just stared at the floor like he wanted to disappear into it. Outside the courtroom, David was smiling for the first time since we started. "She's not happy with them," he said, "and that's good for us." After that hearing, the neighborhood shifted. People started talking openly. Not in whispers behind curtains, but in actual conversations in driveways and at mailboxes. David interviewed homeowners who'd been targeted. A guy cited for parking his work truck in his own driveway even though nothing prohibited it. A woman threatened because her bushes were too tall despite being within the written guidelines. And then the financials came out, tens of thousands spent on legal fees chasing petty nonsense. Dues raised, reserves drained, all while Cheryl walked around acting like she was protecting property values. A special meeting got called. I sat in the back of the community center, arms crossed, and watched neighbor after neighbor stand up and describe the same pattern: warnings, threats, fines, letters, intimidation. Cheryl tried to defend herself, talked about standards, about rules, about keeping the neighborhood beautiful. Nobody was buying it anymore. Then the vote happened. Ballots collected, counted, silence thick enough to taste. The result was announced, overwhelming. Cheryl was removed from the board. She sat there for a second like her brain couldn't process the word no. Then she stood, gathered her clipboard, her papers, her little stack of control, and walked out without saying a single thing. And in that moment it finally hit me. This was never about firewood. It was about power. Document everything. And don't let bullies with clipboards rewrite what you own.